Hey guys, it's been a year since my grandpa died, and in honor of his memory, I cracked open a bottle of vodka to celebrate his life. Here's a story for you bros. Also, share your own if you got them. Come from a post-Soviet era country. Dad ran off when I was 3, and Mom was dumb as so I went to live with Grandpa. Grandpa's a pretty solid guy. Runs a farm of his own. Grandma died a few years back. A few dozen sheep, half a dozen cows, and a few horses. Has much more, but has professionals to keep them out of the city area and tend to them on a massive scale in the countryside. Mom goes off to Turkey so she can restart her career in fashion management or some Live alone with Grandpa on farm. Happiest 3 years of my life. Drink loads of goat, cow, and horse milk, and eat their meat too. Horse meat's delicious. Try it. Go horseback riding. Take livestock out for grazing, grow vegetables. Learn how to fight and stand up to bullies. Learn how to properly cook meat and bake bread. At that point, my shitty aunt and her deadbeat husband returned from Saudi Arabia with their towelhead Muslim paradise. Broke as fuck, so Grandpa lets them live with us, lets them use his car, and even gives them money to rent a house of their own. Even stopped his Muslim dickheads from trying to get me circumcised at the age of fucking 7. Mom wants me to live with the aunt and uncle who live in the city so I can go to a good school. So I have to leave my grandpa and live with these 2 Islamic dickheads. The next 4 years were hell. These fucking assholes were ridiculously strict and abusive Muslims. Forced to be Muslim myself. Have to pray 5 times a day. Have to wash nearly entire body to be pure for prayer. Waste 3 hours every Friday to go to a mosque with other hairy neckbeard Islamics as they pray to Allah. Aunt and uncle don't drink or do drugs, but hitting me was their outlet. Not even disciplining me by speaking or slaps on the hand. Literal strikes that gave me bruises on my face and body. Here's a fucking 40-year-old fucker and his wife, routinely beating a 7-year-old. Best times were in summer, when I visit my grandpa and he'd always have food and toys waiting for me. Always crying when I had to leave his house at the end of summer. Mom didn't know how bad it was with my aunt and uncle, and I didn't say anything because I was too scared. Eventually, ran away by the age of 9, and the police found me at an internet cafe and returned me home. Got the ass whooping of a lifetime. Got hit by a fucking rolling pin and got a bump on the head, followed by a standing in the corner for 4 hours as punishment. Ran away again at 10/11 years old, but this time I had money. So I bought some bus tickets, and 7 hours later I arrived at my grandpa's house, way outside of the city. Took me in without a word. He already suspected that I was being abused by aunt and uncle. They show up the next day demanding I come back. Grandpa pulls out a fucking rifle and goes to the door. They run with their tails tucked and show up with police. They call my mom, and I'm forcibly removed while they keep my grandfather down on the ground. Mom, at this point, was in a relationship with a guy that she met in Turkey. They'd already been going for a while and were planning to get married. After the call, she decided she'd be willing to marry him and now get me out of that shithole. I ran away again, and this time I wandered from a friend's house to friend's house, being sheltered by them, and occasionally sleeping in the warm stores in public bathroom malls and movie theaters. At this point, my mom had already gotten married to my stepdad and planned to come visit and surprise me. When they arrive, I'm nowhere to be found. They're frantic as fuck, go to my granddad, and he doesn't know. Granddad explains to my aunt and uncle that were most likely abusing me and beating me. Eventually, I had nowhere to go, so I turned up at a police station and they brought me back. Here comes the waterworks. This bitch of an aunt and her cocksucker husband could actually act, crying and wondering why I ran away. I was stunned at the display of their drama serial-esque acting they portrayed. Grandpa came in and patted me on the head. Eventually, Mum and Stepdad took me away. Every time they tried to pat me on the head or hug me, my natural instinct was to duck or back away. Stepdad was especially appalled. Moved to the US and visited my grandfather during the summers. He was already reaching the mid-70s, so his mind and body became weaker. Reached the point that he had to sell most of the house/farm and moved in with my aunt and uncle. Didn't want to see those monsters, but went for Grandpa's sake. No surprises when I saw they treated him like garbage. Here was a guy who worked so hard to support his 5 kids, his 2 dead brothers, 4 kids and their wives, that his hair has turned completely white by the time he's reached his mid-50s. Here was a guy who I saw wrestle a neighbor's bull away from one of our heifers, female cow, who was trying to fuck her. Here was a guy who reached 70 before he even drew back on how much vodka he drank. This fucking harpy and her husband turned him into skin and bones. His boisterous and larger-than-life presence became small and compacted into a small room in front of a TV. This was the first time I really learned how to hate someone. As a kid, I was getting beat and betrayed for being a bastard child. I only felt fear and wondered what I had done wrong. Now, as I was growing up, I saw that these people were just psychopaths, and given any shred of power, they'd lord it over others. I eventually began saving up my allowance during the school year. I began to mow lawns, trim hedges, clean yards and pools. Dad, stepdad, but I loved the guy, was astonished that I was making nearly $200 a month, in addition to my allowance of $8 a week. By the time summer rolled around, I visited home. I'd buy socks, shirts, shoes, and coats for Grandpa. Even took him out from a summer horse festival celebration, where they did some crazy shit, like hanging off the side of horses. Got him a nice TV so he could watch those action movies on the cable channels, old-ass Jackie Chan movies, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and some newer stuff, like Undisputed. Dude was happy as fuck, but was still getting shit on by his own daughter. She intentionally didn't do his laundry or forgot to pick up his meds. As I grew older, I hated these dickheads more and more. They even had the gall to ask why I was spending so much money on my grandfather and not on them. I reached 18, and that was the last time I saw my grandpa for a while. Since my dad was rich as fuck, he sent me to a good California university, where I worked my ass off, taking a winter break and summer break classes, managing to graduate in barely under 3 years, with a bachelor's in CS. Talked to Dad about wanting to move Grandpa in with me, and he said he'd help me out financially. After half a year of going to the consultant every week, got him a visa. Went and picked him up and brought him into the States. Grandpa was fucking ecstatic. It took nearly a fourth of my paycheck every month to afford him medical insurance, doctor's visits, and meds. But I was happy. I took him to horse races, but he laughed at all the posh dudes with their hair, and I quote, "Uniforms fit only to please other men." Rough translation. Took him to an outdoor shooting range. He told me more about his time in the military and how he eventually had to leave after his 2 brothers died, and he had to work at numerous jobs to support everyone. Handled rifles, pistols, and shotguns with ridiculous accuracy, despite being over 80 years old. Learned a bit of English and began going around by himself, making friends with the old Russian guys throughout the city. He had an enjoyable time. I like to think that he was at his happiest those last 5 years of his life. Passed away in 86. Took him back to the homeland to be buried alongside with Grandma near the rural village area. Out of nowhere, all of these assholes who were nowhere to be seen when he needed to be cared for started showing up as if they were truly saddened. Buried him, and afterwards we were all informed that the last of his will and testament. The lawyer pulls out a fat stack of papers and begins discussing business. Grandpa drank like a fucking pirate and was rowdy as hell. Grandpa raised farm animals for a large portion of his life. Really common thing to do on the side while you also work. Grandpa was a pretty normal guy, it seemed. Nope. Grandpa knew how to invest his money in long-term growth assets. Grandpa bought a piece of land outside the city around the late 80s, right when the Soviet Union collapsed. Back then it was dirt cheap, because dumbass Russians didn't do shit with cities. 26 years of growth later, this piece of land that went from $2,000 of value to over $400,000, which is a fucking fortune back where I come from. The eyes of my family members when they see the value of the land. They started laughing and hollering like they won the lottery. That wasn't all though. He also had 400 sheep, 120 cows, and 60 horses that had to be tended by workers. Their net value came in approximately $10,000 of their own. After he appraised the value, he read the actual letter, and it went, "I've lived a long life filled with many hardships. My family was big, and I worked hard to help you build the path of your own lives. Whatever I could give, I did, whether it was money or guidance. In my old age, I realized that none of you cared for the hardships I faced and only wanted more. My own daughter would insult me, and husband would treat me like I was a burden of his life. My brother's children, whom I'd raised as if they were own, were distant and never bothered to even call me on their phone. The only child whom I raised that reciprocated my gratitude wasn't even my own. He was my grandson. He took care of me and valued all that I had to offer. In the time I spent in a foreign land, I experienced things I could never imagine. Lived out my life of happiness. The ones that I called my own children couldn't even do a fraction of that service, and like the leeches, only wished to suck more from me, and discard me when I could offer no more. In this lifetime, I learned quite a few things, and have some value still to offer.
But to those who ignored me and treated me as a pest, I will not acknowledge in the least. I understand that the only person deserved my true gratitude. Thus, I leave all of the land and assets I own to my grandson, and my grandson only.
Mentioned me by full name.
And no one else may say claim to it.
Old man was grumpy as fuck. I was crying halfway through the letter, and I wanted to laugh my ass off by the time I heard the end. I'd never seen a group of people explode faster. Aunts, uncles, distant relatives all began to talk shit. Some at me, some at the lawyer, and at each other. Amongst the 8 people, 5 of them were absolutely losing their shit, excluding me, lawyer and dad. Even my own mum, who was talking to me like I personally killed Grandpa. Then, shitty aunt and 2 uncles talked to lawyer, saying that they wanted to dispute the claim. Nope. Because it stated me directly by name, and there was no confusion as to what was to be divided. I got everything. As soon as the lawyer explained that, they came to me like a fucking dogs, saying at how I'd goaded him by taking him away to the US, and how he was fine where he was, said my aunt and her shitty husband. At this point, I was emotional as hell when I heard them. I fucking shattered. I began screaming at them, using every single swear I knew, even though I was rusty in my native tongue. Never forget those gas words. I told them how I should kill them for the grief they caused me and my grandpa. Then told them the rest of my family, including my mom, that they could have at least helped him and taken care of him. But it took some kid to work to the point of exhaustion for 3 years so he could get his grandfather away from the shit environment he was in. They tried to say shit, but I got louder and louder. Then Dad stepped in and walked me out. Lawyer came up, gave me documents, shook my hands, and said it was the first time he'd saw somebody explode that hard. So I went back to the States. I came back 2 months later and talked to a financial advisor, sold the livestock for $12,000 and pocketed it. At this point, the land my grandfather owned is nearly $500,000 in value, and the people are sending me emails constantly about buying it. Talked to the advisor and decided to lease it. Rented it to a pretty large retail company that wanted to pay me a price of $50,000 after tax, and after a 5-year contract, I'll probably ramp it up. That spot became an extremely valuable plot of land in a very commercially dominated area. Brings us to now. I've cut contact with most of my family. Even Mom's not that involved. I still keep little sis and granddad in because I love them. Here's a shot to Grandpa, peeps.